What happens when a struggling art student takes a nanny job with a mysterious billionaire, only to discover his dark secrets could destroy them both? Emma Rodriguez thought she was just answering a simple job posting to help pay for her mother's cancer treatment. But when she steps into Damian Cross's penthouse world, she finds herself trapped in a web of money laundering, dangerous enemies, and a love that could cost her everything. Greetings, fellow dreamers. This tale is filled with love, secrets, and a twist you'll never forget. Step into the tale. The October wind carved through Emma Rodriguez like a blade as she stood before the towering glass monolith that pierced the Seattle skyline. Her fingers, numb with cold and nerves, clutched the worn leather portfolio that contained her entire future. 23 years old, drowning in student debt and her mother's medical bills. She had never imagined stepping foot in such rarefied air. The penthouse elevator climbed like a rocket, each floor number lighting up like a countdown to her fate. Emma caught her reflection in the polished steel doors, smoothing her simple black dress and touching the pearl earrings her grandmother had left her. They were the only valuable things she owned, and wearing them felt like carrying a prayer. When the doors whispered open, Emma stepped into a world that stole her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a living painting, while original artworks adorned walls that seemed to stretch toward heaven. The penthouse was a symphony of glass, steel, and money, so old it had forgotten its own age. Miss Rodriguez. The voice hit her like aged whiskey, smooth and burning. Emma turned to find a man who rewrote her understanding of power. Silver threaded his dark hair, and his eyes held the dangerous intelligence of someone who owned more than buildings. He moved like smoke in an expensive suit, every step calculated. "Mr. Cross," she managed, extending her hand. "Thank you for considering me for the nanny position." He didn't take her hand. Instead, his coffee-dark eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. Something flickered across his face, an expression she couldn't decode but that made her pulse stutter. "Please, sit." He gestured toward a cream sofa that probably cost more than her car. "Wine." Emma hesitated. Alcohol at a job interview felt wrong, but refusing felt worse. She accepted the glass with a smile that felt painted on. "Tell me," Damian Cross said, settling across from her like a predator finding the perfect hunting ground. "What brings you here tonight?" Emma opened her portfolio, her rehearsed words tumbling out about CPR certifications and volunteer work, but his raised eyebrows stopped her cold. "I saw your advertisement," she continued, faltering. "Live-in nanny, discretion required." Discretion. He tasted the word like fine wine. "Yes, that's essential." Before Emma could ask what he meant, small feet thundered across hardwood floors. A little girl burst into the room, clutching a stuffed elephant, her honey-blonde pigtails bouncing. "Daddy, who's the pretty lady?" Emma's heart cracked open. The child was luminous, with her father's intelligent eyes and a constellation of freckles across her nose. Purple star-covered pajamas completed the picture of innocent beauty. "Sophie, this is Miss Emma." Damian's voice transformed, becoming velvet. "She might take care of you." Sophie approached with the fearless curiosity of childhood. "Are you going to be my new nanny?" The last one was mean and smelled like ashtrays. Emma laughed despite her nerves. "I don't smoke, and I try very hard not to be mean. What do you like to do?" "I love painting and dragon stories. Daddy reads to me every night, but sometimes work steals him away. I'm an art student," Emma said, her eyes lighting up. "Maybe we could paint dragons together." Sophie clapped her hands, stars dancing in her eyes. "Really? Could we paint a whole dragon kingdom?" "Sophie." Damian's voice cut through the moment like silk over steel. "Bedtime. Maria will help you." An older woman materialized as if summoned. Sophie hugged Emma impulsively, whispering, "I hope you stay," before skipping away, her elephant trailing behind. Alone again, the air shifted. Damian watched Emma with an expression that made her skin burn. There was hunger in his gaze, but not the kind that frightened her. Instead, it awakened something she didn't understand. "You're gifted with her," he said finally. "She's extraordinary. You're blessed. Her mother died when she was 3. His voice carried old pain like a scar that never fully healed. It's been Sophie and me against the world since then. Emma's heart clenched. I'm so sorry. That must have been unbearable. He moved to the window, his silhouette carved against the glittering city. Sophie struggles with caregivers. Most women who enter our lives are more interested in my portfolio than my daughter. I understand your protection, Emma said softly. But I need you to know that I'm here because I love children. The money matters, yes, but not for the reasons you think. He turned, curiosity replacing wariness. Oh, Emma took a breath that tasted like courage. My mother is fighting cancer. Has been for 2 years. Even with insurance, the bills are crushing us. I work 3 jobs and go to school, but it's not enough. This position would let me help her while doing what I'm passionate about. Something fundamental shifted in his expression. He returned to his seat, leaning forward with sudden intensity. Family should always come first, Emma. The way he spoke her name sent electricity down her spine. There was an intimacy to it that crossed every professional line, yet she found herself leaning into it rather than away. Thank you, Mr. Cross. I hope you'll consider me. Damian, he corrected. And I think we should explore this arrangement immediately. Relief flooded through her. When would you like me to start? Tonight? A trial period. See how Sophie responds to you in the morning? Emma blinked. Tonight? I don't have overnight things. Maria can provide everything you need. His eyes held hers with magnetic force. Unless you're uncomfortable with that, the request was unusual. But wealthy people operated by different rules. And she couldn't afford to seem inflexible. That would be fine. Thank you, Damian smiled, and Emma felt the world tilt. There was danger in that smile, something that spoke of dark chocolate and forbidden territories. Maria will show you to your room, he said, pressing a hidden button. We have breakfast at 8. Sophie loves weekend pancakes. As Maria appeared, Damian stood and moved close enough that Emma caught his scent. Something expensive and masculine that made her head swim. Sweet dreams, Emma, he murmured, his voice pitched low enough to feel like a caress. Following Maria down a hallway lined with paintings worth more than small countries, Emma's mind reeled. She had come seeking employment and found something infinitely more complicated. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment, decorated in soft blues and silvers with a bed that looked like a cloud. As she settled into luxury beyond her wildest dreams, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she had stepped into something much larger than a simple nanny job. The way Damian looked at her, the undercurrents crackling between them, the almost intimate atmosphere despite the professional setting. She was no longer just Emma Rodriguez, struggling art student. She was a player in a game whose rules she didn't understand, with stakes she couldn't begin to imagine. Emma woke to sunlight streaming through windows that revealed the city spread below like a kingdom. For a moment she forgot where she was, the silk sheets and Egyptian cotton pillowcase, feeling like a dream made tangible. Then reality crashed back. The penthouse, the interview. Damian Cross. The clock read 7:30. She had 30 minutes to make herself presentable for the most important breakfast of her life. Maria had left clothes folded on the dresser, designer jeans that fit like they were tailored for her body, cashmere sweater and deep emerald that made her dark eyes shine. Emma stared at herself in the mirror, hardly recognizing the polished woman looking back. The dining room overlooked the city through floor-to-ceiling windows that made Emma feel like she was dining in the clouds. Sophie sat at a table that could seat 12, swinging her legs and drawing dragons on a napkin with serious concentration. Emma. Sophie launched herself from her chair, wrapping small arms around Emma's waist. You're still here? I thought maybe I dreamed you. I'm real, Emma laughed, hugging the little girl back. And I heard someone wants pancakes. Daddy makes the best pancakes in the whole universe, Sophie declared, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. But don't tell Maria. She thinks her cookies are the best everything. Your secret is safe with me. Damian entered carrying a platter of perfectly golden pancakes, and Emma's breath caught. Gone was the intimidating businessman from last night. This morning he wore dark jeans and a black sweater that clung to his frame, sleeves pushed up to reveal strong forearms. His hair was slightly mussed, making him look younger, more approachable. more dangerous. Good morning, Emma. I trust you slept well. His voice was still that whiskey-smooth baritone, but something had changed overnight. The predatory edge was still there, but now it felt like an invitation rather than a threat. Wonderfully, thank you. This place is incredible. He set the pancakes down, his fingers brushing hers as he handed her a plate. The contact lasted a fraction of a second too long, sending heat racing up her arm. Daddy, can Emma paint with me after breakfast? Sophie asked, drowning her pancakes in syrup with the enthusiasm only children possessed. We'll see, Princess. Emma and I need to discuss the details of her employment first. Employment. The word felt strange now, loaded with meanings Emma couldn't decipher. They ate in companionable conversation, Sophie chattering about school and friends while Damian watched Emma with those dark, assessing eyes. She found herself stealing glances at him, noting how he smiled genuinely when Sophie spoke, how his entire demeanor softened around his daughter. Sophie, why don't you go start setting up your art supplies? Damian suggested after they finished eating. I'll send Emma up in a few minutes. Sophie bounded away, leaving them alone in the golden morning light. The air immediately thickened with unspoken tension. Walk with me, Damian said, leading her to the windows that overlooked his private balcony garden. This is beautiful, Emma breathed, looking out at the perfectly manicured space that bloomed even in October. I had it designed for Sophie. She needed something alive in all this glass and steel. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. You were remarkable with her last night, and this morning, she's already attached to you. She's easy to love. Love. He repeated the word like he was testing its weight. That's not something Sophie and I have much experience with. At least not from the women who enter our world. Emma turned to face him, suddenly bold. What kind of women usually enter your world, Damian? His eyes darkened at her use of his first name. Beautiful ones. Sophisticated ones. Women who see dollar signs when they look at me, and a meal ticket when they look at Sophie? Is that what you think I see? He stepped closer. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I don't know what you see, Emma. And that terrifies me. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. I see a man who makes pancakes for his daughter, Emma said softly, who reads her bedtime stories and creates gardens in the sky for her. I see someone who's been hurt before and is trying to protect the most important thing in his world. Something raw and vulnerable flashed across his face before the mask slipped back into place. The position comes with certain requirements, he said, his voice taking on a businesslike tone that didn't match the fire in his eyes. You would live here, of course. Be available when I travel. Accompany us to social events when appropriate. Social events. Charity, galas, business functions. You would need to be comfortable in those environments. Emma nodded. Though the thought of navigating high society terrified her, there's something else. His voice dropped, becoming intimate again. Discretion, as I mentioned. What happens in this house? What you see, what you learn about my business dealings, about my personal life, stays here. Completely confidential, there was weight to his words that made Emma's pulse quicken. Of course, I would never breach your privacy. Good. He reached out, his fingers barely grazing her cheek. The touch was feather-light but burned like a brand. Because I'm beginning to think privacy might be impossible with you here. Before Emma could ask what he meant, Sophie's voice echoed from upstairs. Emma, come see my art room. It has windows in the ceiling. Damian's hand dropped, but his eyes never left Emma's face. Go ahead. Make her happy. It's been too long since this house heard real laughter. Emma started to turn, then stopped. Damian, what kind of business are you in exactly? The job posting was vague. His smile was sharp as a blade. Import and export. International consulting. Nothing you need to worry your beautiful head about. The dismissive tone rankled. But something in his eyes warned her not to push. Not yet. I'll go find Sophie, she said instead. As she climbed the stairs to Sophie's art room, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking deeper into a labyrinth with no clear path out. Damian Cross was no ordinary businessman, and this was no ordinary nanny position. But when Sophie grabbed her hand and pulled her into a sun-drenched room filled with canvases and dreams, Emma pushed her doubts aside. Whatever game she had stumbled into, whatever secrets lurked beneath Damian's perfect facade, she was already in too deep to turn back. The question was whether she would survive whatever came next with her heart intact. 3 weeks later, Emma had settled into a rhythm that felt dangerously like home. Sophie bloomed under her care, chattering about school over breakfast and creating masterpiece after masterpiece in her skylit art room. The little girl's laughter had become the soundtrack to Emma's days, a melody that healed wounds she hadn't known she carried, but it was the nights that unraveled her carefully constructed walls. Damian would appear after Sophie's bedtime, materializing in the kitchen where Emma graded assignments or the living room where she read. Their conversations began innocently enough, discussions about Sophie's progress or plans for weekend activities, but somehow they always evolved into something deeper, more intimate. Tonight was different. Emma found Damian on the balcony, his silhouette stark against the city lights, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Rough day?" she asked, sliding the glass door closed behind her. He turned, and Emma's breath caught. In the moonlight, with his guard down, he was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly broken. "Sophie asked me about her mother today," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "About why she died. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that sometimes the world just takes the things you love most?" Emma moved closer, drawn by his pain like a moth to flame. "What did you tell her?" "That her mother was the most beautiful angel God ever made, and he needed her back in heaven." His laugh was bitter. "Pretty lies for a child who deserves so much more than the wreckage I've become." "You're not wreckage, Damian. You're a man who's been through hell and came out the other side, still capable of love. Sophie is proof of that." He set down his glass and turned to face her fully. "You don't know what I've done, Emma, what I'm still doing. If you did, you'd run as far and as fast as you could." The warning in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it only made her step closer. "Then tell me." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "You want the truth? The real truth about what pays for all this?" He gestured to the penthouse around them. "It's not import and export, sweetheart. It's much darker than that." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs, but she held her ground. "I'm listening. I launder money, Emma, for cartels, crime families, corrupt politicians. I take their dirty cash and turn it clean. I'm very good at it, and I charge accordingly." His smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Every designer dress Sophie wears, every gourmet meal she eats, every private school tuition check I write, it's all paid for with blood money." The revelation hit Emma like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, her mind reeling. "You're a criminal. I'm a businessman who provides a service." His voice was cold now, the warmth she had grown addicted to completely absent. "And you're an employee who signed a confidentiality agreement." Emma's vision blurred with tears of rage and betrayal. "I trusted you. I let myself believe that you were different, that this was real. This is real, Emma. More real than anything I've ever felt." His mask cracked, revealing the vulnerable man beneath. "Do you think I wanted to fall for my daughter's nanny? Do you think I plan to care about a woman who makes me want to be better than I am? Fall for me?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Damian closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands framing her face with desperate tenderness. "I'm in love with you, Emma Rodriguez. Completely, irrevocably, destructively in love with you, and it's going to ruin us both." Before she could respond, his mouth claimed hers in a kiss that tasted of desperation and whiskey and promises that could never be kept. Emma melted into him, her body betraying every rational thought screaming in her head. His hands tangled in her hair, and she could feel his heart hammering against her chest, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Emma saw her own torment reflected in his dark eyes. "This is insane," she whispered. "Completely," he agreed, his thumb tracing her swollen lower lip. "But I can't stop. God help me, I can't stop wanting you." Emma closed her eyes, trying to find her center in the chaos he had created. "Damian," What you do, it's wrong. People get hurt. People get hurt every day, sweetheart. At least this way, Sophie gets to have a future. And what kind of future is that? Built on other people's suffering? His hands dropped away from her face, and the distance that opened between them felt like a chasm. The kind where she's safe, educated, and protected. The kind where she never has to worry about anything, except finding out what her father really is. The words hit their mark. Damian flinched as if she had struck him. She'll never find out. I've made sure of that. How can you be certain? What happens when she's older and starts asking questions? By then, I'll have enough put away to walk away from all of this. We'll disappear, start over somewhere clean. Emma stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the man she had fallen in love with. He wasn't evil, but he was drowning in choices that had seemed like the only options at the time. Now those choices had become a prison for all of them. There's something else, he said, his voice barely audible. Something you need to know before you make your decision. Emma's blood turned to ice. What? Your mother's cancer treatment? The experimental therapy she started 3 weeks ago. He couldn't meet her eyes. I'm paying for it. All of it. The world tilted on its axis. Emma gripped the balcony railing to keep from falling. What are you talking about? Insurance is covering it. No, Emma. Insurance denied her claim. I had my people forge the approval paperwork and route the payments through a series of shell companies. Your mother has no idea. Betrayal crashed over her like a tsunami. You manipulated me. You made me dependent on you. I saved your mother's life. His voice cracked with emotion. She was dying, Emma. Without that treatment, she had maybe 6 months. Now she has a fighting chance. Using blood money. You used dirty money to save her? I used whatever I had to keep the woman I love from losing the person who matters most to her. Emma sank onto the balcony chair, her legs no longer able to support her. Every breath felt like drowning. How long? She whispered. How long have you been paying for her treatment? Since the day after I hired you? The timeline crashed into her consciousness. He had orchestrated everything. The job posting, the interview, even her mother's treatment. She hadn't stumbled into his world by accident. She had been carefully, methodically recruited. Why? The word came out broken. Why me? Damian knelt beside her chair, his face etched with anguish. Because the moment you walked into my penthouse, something inside me that had been dead for 5 years came back to life. Because watching you with Sophie made me remember what it felt like to hope. Because you looked at me like I was worth saving, and I hadn't felt worthy of salvation in so long. Tears streamed down Emma's face as the full scope of her situation became clear. She was trapped between her love for a criminal and her mother's life, between her growing feelings for Sophie and her moral compass that screamed she should run. I need time, she said finally. I need to think. Of course. Damian stood, his businessman mask sliding back into place. But Emma, whatever you decide, know this. I will never let any harm come to you or your mother. That's a promise I'll keep until my last breath. As he turned to go back inside, Emma called out to him. Damian. He paused, hope flickering in his eyes. If I stay, if I choose this, there's no going back, is there? His smile was heartbreaking in its sadness. No, sweetheart. Once you're in my world, you're in it forever. The question is whether you trust me enough to believe I'll make it worth the cost. As the glass door slid shut behind him, leaving Emma alone with the glittering city and her impossible choice, she realized that she was no longer just making a decision about a job. She was choosing whether to save her soul or lose it completely in the arms of a man who might be her salvation or her destruction. Emma had made her choice. 2 months later, she moved through Damian's world like she belonged there, attending charity galas and designer gowns, making small talk with senators' wives, and pretending she didn't know that the donations funding children's hospitals came from Colombian drug cartels. The guilt ate at her like acid, but every time her mother called with good news about her treatment, Emma found the strength to bury her conscience a little deeper. She and Damian existed in a strange limbo, their desire for each other crackling in every shared glance. every accidental touch, every goodnight that lasted just a heartbeat too long. But they maintained the fiction of propriety, of professional distance, even as the space between them grew smaller each day. Tonight was different. Sophie was at a sleepover, and Maria had left early for her sister's birthday. Emma found herself alone in the penthouse with a man who had become her obsession and her torment. She was reading in the living room when Damian appeared, loosening his tie with tired fingers. He had been in back-to-back meetings all day, orchestrating financial miracles that would make dirty money disappear into legitimate investments. "How was your day?" Emma asked, closing her book. "Profitable," he said, with that sharp smile that no longer fooled her. Underneath the successful businessman facade, she saw the exhaustion, the weight of choices that grew heavier each day. There's leftover soup if you're hungry. Maria made enough for an army. Instead of heading to the kitchen, he crossed to where she sat, his dark eyes intense with something that made her pulse race. "I'm hungry," he said, his voice dropping to that intimate register that made her toes curl. "But not for food." Emma's breath caught as he sat beside her on the sofa, close enough that his heat enveloped her like a drug. "Damian, do you know what torture is, Emma?" His fingers traced the line of her jaw with reverent gentleness. "It's living in the same space as the woman you love and pretending you don't want to worship every inch of her skin. It's watching her smile at other men at charity galas and knowing you have no right to claim her. It's lying awake every night knowing she's just down the hall and that she deserves so much better than what you can offer." Emma's resistance crumbled like sandcastles against the tide. "You're not the only one who's been tortured." His pupils dilated. Suddenly his mouth was on hers, desperate and demanding. Emma melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as months of suppressed desire erupted between them. He tasted like whiskey and promises, like salvation and damnation rolled into one intoxicating package. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damian rested his forehead against hers. "Tell me to stop," he whispered against her lips. "Tell me to walk away, and I will. But if I don't stop now, I won't be able to later." Instead of words, Emma answered by pulling him back down to her, losing herself in the fire they had been fighting for so long. They made love on the sofa where she had first sat for her interview, their bodies moving together with desperate urgency, as if they could somehow fusion their broken pieces into something whole. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Emma's head on Damian's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "God help us both. But I love you more than I've ever loved anything." "I love you too," Emma whispered back, the words both a benediction and a curse. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. For a few precious hours, Emma let herself believe they could make this work. She woke to the sound of voices in the foyer. Male voices, unfamiliar and urgent. Damian was already sitting up, his body tense as a bowstring. "Get dressed," he said quietly, pulling on his pants. "Stay here." But Emma had heard something in those voices that made her blood freeze. She grabbed Damian's shirt from the floor and followed him toward the sound, staying in the shadows of the hallway. "We have a problem, Cross." The voice belonged to a man with a thick accent, possibly Eastern European. "Your little laundry service has attracted attention." "What kind of attention?" Damian's voice was steady, but Emma could see the tension in his shoulders. "Federal. They've been tracking the Hernandez money, and it led them straight to your door." Emma's heart stopped. "Federal agents? FBI?" They were investigating Damian. "How long do I have?" Damian asked. "Maybe a week, maybe less. You need to disappear and fast." "What about my daughter?" "Take her with you. New identities are already being prepared." Emma pressed herself against the wall, trying to process what she was hearing. Damian was about to run, to take Sophie and disappear forever, and he hadn't told her. "There's something else," the man continued. "Your nanny, Emma Rodriguez. She's a problem." Emma's blood turned to ice. "What kind of problem?" Damian's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "She's been asking questions. Digging into your business? Making phone calls to people who might be interested in what she's learned? That's impossible." But even as he said it, Emma could hear the doubt creeping into Damian's voice. "Is it? Think about it, Cross. Beautiful young woman shows up out of nowhere. Perfect timing. Perfect story about her sick mother. Gets close to you. Gets access to your home, your business dealings. Classic honey trap operation. Emma wanted to scream, to run into the room and tell Damian it was all lies. But her feet were frozen to the floor, her voice trapped in her throat. Check your phone records, the man continued. Check her background more carefully this time. You'll find the truth. There was silence for a long moment. Then Emma heard the sound of a phone being dialed, the click of keys on a computer. Sona Fabich, Damian breathed. Emma's heart shattered. Whatever they had found, whatever fabricated evidence they had presented, Damian believed it. She could hear it in his voice. The death of trust, the birth of betrayal. Get out, Damian said, his voice deadly calm. Both of you now. What about the girl? The man asked. I'll handle her myself. Emma heard footsteps approaching and panicked. She ran back to the living room, diving onto the sofa and pulling a throw blanket over her mostly naked body just as Damian appeared in the doorway. He looked like a stranger. The warm, loving man who had held her hours ago was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. Did you enjoy the show? His voice was arctic. What are you talking about? Emma sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest. The whole performance, the innocent art student, the sick mother, the wide-eyed attraction. You played me perfectly. Damian, I don't understand. Drop the act. His voice cracked like a whip. I know who you are. I know who sent you. Emma stared at him in horror. Nobody sent me. I don't know what you're talking about. FBI agent Emma Rodriguez graduated from Quantico 3 years ago. Specialized in financial crimes and undercover operations. Each word hit her like a physical blow. Your mother's cancer is a cover story. She's been dead for 5 years. The world tilted on its axis. Emma felt like she was drowning, like reality itself was dissolving around her. That's not true, she whispered. None of that's true. My mother called me yesterday. She's getting better. The woman you've been talking to is Agent Sarah Chen, your handler. Every conversation has been monitored, every tender moment between us recorded for evidence. Emma's mind reeled. Nothing made sense. Her mother was real. Her life was real. She wasn't an FBI agent. But as she stared into Damian's eyes, she saw that he believed every word. Whoever had fed him this information had done their job perfectly. Damian, please. Listen to me. I love you. I love Sophie. I would never don't. His voice broke slightly. Don't you dare mention my daughter. After everything you've done, after all the ways you've betrayed us, don't you dare speak her name. Tears streamed down Emma's face as she watched the man she loved disappear before her eyes, replaced by a stranger who looked at her like she was poison. You have 10 minutes to get dressed and get out, he said, turning toward the door. If you're not gone by then, I'll have you removed. And Emma? She looked up at him through her tears. If you ever come near my daughter again, if you ever try to contact us, I will destroy you. That's not a threat. That's a promise. As his footsteps faded down the hallway, Emma collapsed onto the sofa, her world crumbling around her. Everything she had built, everything she had risked, everyone she had come to love, was gone. And the worst part was that she didn't even understand why. 6 months later, Emma stood in the rain outside Seattle Children's Hospital, watching through the window as a little girl with honey blonde pigtails laughed at something her father was saying. Sophie looked different, older somehow, as if the weight of sudden change had forced her to grow up too quickly. Damian looked like a ghost of the man she had once loved. His hair was shorter, darker, obviously dyed. He had lost weight, and there were new lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible choices. But he was there in the children's cancer ward, reading 2 sick kids just like Sophie used to beg him to read to her. Emma had spent months unraveling the web of lies that had destroyed her life. The truth, when it finally emerged, was both simpler and more devastating than she could have imagined. There was no FBI investigation. No Agent Sarah Chen, no federal task force targeting Damian's money laundering operation. There was only Viktor Kozlov, Damian's former partner. who had orchestrated the entire deception to eliminate the one thing that made Damian vulnerable: his capacity to love. Emma's mother really was alive, really was fighting cancer, and really had been receiving treatment funded by Damian's guilty conscience. The woman Emma had been speaking to was her actual mother, not an FBI handler. But Victor had convinced Damian otherwise, using fabricated phone records and forged documents to paint Emma as a federal agent. The cruelest irony was that Damian had been planning to leave his criminal life behind. The shell companies, the laundered money, the dangerous associates. He had been systematically dismantling it all to build a clean life for Sophie and the woman he loved. Victor couldn't allow that. A Damian Cross in love was a Damian Cross who might develop a conscience, who might decide that some secrets were worth exposing. So he had poisoned the well, turning Damian's greatest strength into his most devastating weakness. Emma wiped rain from her cheeks. Though she suspected some of the wetness came from tears, she couldn't seem to stop shedding. She had tracked them here through a network of contacts that had taken months to cultivate and a small fortune in favors to access. Finding Damian Cross when he didn't want to be found was like chasing shadows, but she had found them. And now she stood at the crossroads of her own impossible choice. The glass door opened behind her, and Emma's heart stopped. Sophie emerged first, chattering excitedly about the story her daddy had just read. She looked up and saw Emma, and her face lit up like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Emma. Sophie launched herself into Emma's arms, tiny hands clutching at her rain-soaked jacket. Daddy said you had to go away for work, but I knew you'd come back. I knew it. Over Sophie's head, Emma met Damian's eyes. The shock and pain and desperate hope she saw there nearly brought her to her knees. "Hello, Damian," she said softly. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was rough, damaged. "It's not safe." "I know about Victor," Emma said. "I know what he did." "What he made you believe." Something cracked in Damian's carefully constructed armor. "Emma, don't. Whatever game you're playing, I'm not playing anything. Your mother really is getting better, by the way. The treatment worked. She's in remission." Emma's voice broke slightly. "She asks about you every day. About the daughter she never got to meet and the man who saved her life." Damian's face went white. "How do you know that?" "Because I'm not FBI agent Emma Rodriguez. I'm just Emma Rodriguez, art student and part-time nanny, who fell in love with a man who was trying to build something beautiful out of the wreckage of his past." Sophie looked between them, her young mind trying to process the undercurrents she didn't understand. "Daddy, why are you crying?" Damian knelt down, pulling his daughter into his arms. "Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy, princess. And sometimes they cry when they've made terrible mistakes." He looked up at Emma, and she saw the moment he let himself believe. The moment hope crept back into his eyes like sunrise after the longest night. "Victor's dead," he said quietly. "Car accident 3 weeks ago. Very convenient timing." Emma raised an eyebrow. "How convenient? Some accidents are more accidental than others." Damian's smile was sharp as a blade. "I may have left the criminal life behind, but I never forgot the skills and the money laundering. All of it. Gone. Legitimate businesses now, clean money, transparent books. I kept enough to take care of Sophie, but the rest went to the families of people hurt by my former clients. Anonymous donations, untraceable." Emma felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "So you're really out?" "Completely. We're David and Sarah Mitchell now. I run a small investment firm, completely above board. Sophie goes to public school and makes mud pies in the backyard." He stood, still holding his daughter. "It's boring as hell. I've never been happier." "Daddy used a bad word," Sophie whispered conspiratorially to Emma. "I heard that. We'll have to put $1 in the swear jar." The easy domesticity of the moment broke something open in Emma's heart. This was what they could have had. This was what Victor's lies had stolen from them. "Emma," Damian said, his voice careful. "Why are you here? How did you find us?" Emma took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would determine the rest of her life. "I'm here because I love you. Both of you." I'm here because 6 months ago, you asked me to trust you, and I did. Now I'm asking you to trust me." She looked directly into his dark eyes. "I'm here because I want to be Sarah Mitchell's mom and David Mitchell's wife, if they'll have me." The silence stretched between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. "You want to marry my daddy?" Sophie asked with the directness only children possessed. Emma knelt down, so she was eye level with the little girl who had captured her heart from the very first night. "I want to be part of your family if that's okay with you. I want to paint dragons with you and read bedtime stories and teach you how to make pancakes that are almost as good as your daddy's." Sophie threw her arms around Emma's neck. "Yes, yes, yes, yes. Daddy, can we keep her, please?" Over Sophie's head, Emma watched Damian struggle with hope and fear, love, and the knowledge of how much they had already lost. "The woman I fell in love with was Emma Rodriguez," he said finally. "Are you still her? I'm whoever you need me to be. Emma Rodriguez, Sarah Mitchell, or someone entirely new. As long as I get to be yours." Damian crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his hands framing her face with the reverent tenderness she remembered from their first kiss. "I spent 6 months trying to hate you," he whispered against her lips. 6 months trying to convince myself that what we had wasn't real. But every sunrise reminded me of your smile. Every bedtime story made me miss the sound of your laugh. I'm here now," Emma said. "We're all here. We're all alive. Everything else is just details we can figure out together." When he kissed her, it tasted like rain and redemption, like second chances and new beginnings. Sophie cheered and clapped her hands, and passers-by smiled at the reunion playing out in the hospital parking lot. "So what happens now?" Damian asked when they finally broke apart. Emma smiled, the first genuine smile she had managed in 6 months. "Now we go home, wherever that is, as long as we're together." "Home is a little house with a big backyard about an hour north of here," Damian said. "It has a studio for painting and a kitchen where we can make terrible pancakes and a garden where we can teach Sophie about growing things." "It sounds perfect." As they walked toward Damian's car, Sophie between them, their hands linked over her head, Emma felt the pieces of her shattered world clicking back into place. They would have to learn each other all over again, build trust from the ashes of deception, navigate the complex waters of blended family dynamics. But they had something stronger than doubt, more powerful than fear, more enduring than the lies that had temporarily torn them apart. They had love. Complicated, imperfect, hard-won love that had survived betrayal and separation and the machinations of men who understood profit but not the human heart. "Are we going to live happily ever after now?" Sophie asked as Damian buckled her into her car seat. Emma exchanged a look with the man who had become her salvation and her home. "We're going to live," Emma said, "and we're going to be happy. And we're going to be together. That's the best kind of ever after there is." As they drove north toward their new life, Emma watched the Seattle skyline fade in the rearview mirror. She thought about the scared young woman who had stood before those towering glass doors so many months ago, desperate for a job and a chance to save her mother. She had found so much more than either. She had found her family. The end.